There is a moment in every person's life that changes everything. Not the day they become richer, not the day they become stronger, not even the day they finally achieve success. The moment that changes everything is the day they stop needing to be understood. Most people will never experience this moment. Instead, they spend years explaining themselves, explaining why they made a certain decision, explaining why they didn't answer a message, explaining why they need space, explaining why they feel hurt, explaining who they are. And with every explanation, they unknowingly surrender another piece of themselves. But have you ever wondered why silence makes certain people deeply uncomfortable? Why does someone become irritated when you no longer react? Why do some people suddenly chase you the moment you stop chasing them? Why does your absence often create more impact than your presence ever did? Carl Jung believed these moments reveal something far more profound than simple human behavior. They reveal the hidden architecture of the unconscious. Because people rarely respond to who you truly are. They respond to the version of you that exists inside their own minds. As long as you continue reacting exactly as expected, you remain predictable, safe, controllable. But the instant you interrupt that pattern, the psychological game changes. Silence is not merely the absence of words. It is the collapse of expectations. It forces people to confront uncertainty. And uncertainty is one of the greatest sources of psychological discomfort. That is why silence feels powerful. Not because silence manipulates others, but because it removes the illusion that they ever understood you in the first place. Carl Jung once wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." Think about that for a moment. If your silence disturbs someone, what exactly are they reacting to? Your silence? Or the emotions your silence awakens inside them? This is where most people misunderstand power. They believe influence comes from speaking louder, defending themselves faster, winning every argument, explaining every decision. But true psychological authority begins when your peace becomes more important than someone else's approval. This video is not about becoming cold. It is not about manipulating people. And it is certainly not about pretending to be mysterious. It is about discovering why your silence has the power to expose truths that words can never hide. Because sometimes, the loudest conversations happen without anyone saying a single word. Chapter 1. The invisible addiction to being understood. From the moment we enter the world, we begin learning a dangerous lesson. We learn that acceptance must be earned. A child quickly discovers that approval follows certain behaviors. Smile. Be polite. Do not create conflict. Say yes. Make others happy. Little by little, love begins to feel conditional. Without realizing it, we stop asking, who am I? And start asking, what do people expect me to be? This is where the prison begins. Carl Jung called this prison the persona. The persona is not evil. It is necessary. It allows us to function in society. It helps us build relationships, work, communicate, belong. The problem begins when the persona becomes stronger than the self. When pleasing others becomes more important than listening to yourself. Most people spend decades protecting an image, while abandoning the person hiding behind it. This explains why criticism hurts so much. Why rejection feels unbearable. Why being ignored creates anxiety. Because the persona survives on external confirmation. It constantly asks, am I still accepted? Do they still like me? Did I disappoint someone? Should I explain myself? Notice what happens after receiving a simple message. Someone replies with only one word. Immediately, your mind begins creating stories. Are they angry? Did I do something wrong? Should I send another message? Nothing actually happened. Only silence. Yet silence became unbearable. Not because silence is painful, but because your unconscious immediately tried to fill the empty space with fear. This is one of Jung's greatest psychological insights. The unconscious hates uncertainty. It would rather invent painful stories than accept not knowing. And that is precisely why silence becomes such a powerful force. The moment you stop explaining yourself, you interrupt the unconscious expectations of everyone around you. Some people respect it. Others become curious. Many become uncomfortable because they suddenly lose access to the emotional version of you they had learned to control. Most manipulation never happens through force. It happens through predictability. If someone knows exactly how you will react, they no longer need to control you. They simply press the right emotional button, say the right words, ignore you for the right amount of time, offer just enough attention, withdraw it again, repeat, and the cycle continues. This is not always intentional. Many people don't even realize they're doing it. Human beings naturally repeat emotional patterns. Patterns become habits. Habits become identities. Identities become prisons. But something extraordinary happens. The day you refuse to react the way everyone expects, the old pattern breaks. The script disappears. People no longer know which version of you they are speaking to. And uncertainty begins spreading through every relationship. Some will accuse you of changing. Others will say you became distant. Some may even call you arrogant. But very few will ask the real question. Asterisk, what changed inside this person? Asterisk, because the answer forces them to confront something inside themselves. And that is where the real journey begins. For silence does not merely hide your thoughts. It illuminates everyone else's. Hashtag why your silence becomes a mirror. Imagine walking into a room carrying a perfectly polished mirror. You don't speak. You don't judge. You don't accuse anyone. You simply hold the mirror. Some people smile. Others quickly look away. Not because the mirror changed, but because of what it reflects. According to Carl Jung, this is exactly how the unconscious works. Most human relationships are not built upon reality. They are built upon projection. Projection is one of the most misunderstood psychological mechanisms ever described. People assume they see you. In truth, they often see fragments of themselves, the qualities they admire, the fears they deny, the wounds they refuse to heal, the desires they secretly repress. All of it is projected outward. The unconscious prefers this because looking inward is painful. It is easier to believe someone else is the problem than to confront your own darkness. This is why Jung wrote that everything which irritates us in others can lead us back to ourselves. Not because the other person created the emotion, but because they revealed something that was already living inside us. Now, something fascinating happens the moment you become silent. When you stop explaining yourself, people lose the story they created about you. And suddenly, their own unconscious begins filling the empty space. Some assume you are angry. Others believe you are disappointed. Some imagine you think you are better than everyone else. Others convince themselves you secretly hate them. Notice something. None of these conclusions come from you. They come from them. Your silence becomes an empty screen, and the unconscious hates empty screens. It immediately begins projecting. That is why two different people can experience the exact same silence and interpret it in completely opposite ways. One person feels respected. Another feels rejected. One feels inspired. Another feels attacked. The silence never changed. Only the observer did. This is one of Jung's deepest observations. Reality itself is filtered through the unconscious. We never experience life exactly as it is. We experience life through our inner world. That explains why your silence becomes so psychologically disruptive. It removes distractions. It removes explanations. It removes reassurance. And what remains is the other person's own mind. For someone carrying guilt, your silence sounds like judgment. For someone carrying insecurity, your silence feels like rejection. For someone desperate for control, your silence becomes rebellion. You haven't done anything. You simply stopped feeding the emotional script. And suddenly, everyone begins revealing themselves. This is why emotionally manipulative people often panic when you become calm. Chaos needs participation. Manipulation needs reaction. Drama needs an audience. Silence quietly removes all three. Think about the last argument you witnessed. How much of it was really about facts? Very little. Most arguments are collisions between unconscious wounds. One person speaks from abandonment, another from shame, another from pride, another from fear. None of them realize they're defending old emotional scars rather than present reality. Jung believed that until these unconscious forces become conscious, they will direct your life, and you'll call it fate. That sentence alone can transform the way you see every relationship. Perhaps the people exhausting you are not truly reacting to you. Perhaps they are reacting to ghosts from their own past. Ghosts wearing your face. This realization changes everything because you stop carrying responsibilities that never belong to you. You stop believing every uncomfortable emotion in another person is somehow your duty to fix. You stop confusing compassion with emotional servitude. For years, you may have believed that keeping everyone comfortable was kindness. But sometimes, keeping everyone comfortable simply keeps everyone unconscious. Growth almost always begins with discomfort. Silence creates that discomfort, not because silence is cruel, but because silence removes distractions. Without constant explanations, without endless reassurance, people are left alone with themselves. And that is something many spend their entire lives trying to avoid. The strange irony is this. The healthier you become psychologically, the more uncomfortable you may make unhealthy people feel. Not because you judge them, not because you criticize them, but because your presence quietly reminds them of everything they continue avoiding. This is why authentic people often lose relationships during periods of inner transformation. Not because they became worse, because they stopped participating in unconscious patterns. The masks begin falling. The games stop working. The emotional contracts dissolve. Some people celebrate your growth. Others resent it. Neither reaction truly belongs to you. Both reveal the condition of the observer. And perhaps that is the greatest freedom Carl Jung ever tried to teach. You are not responsible for the stories other people create inside their own minds. But there is something even more dangerous than projection, something that silently steals your energy every single day without you noticing. Jung believed this invisible force determines whether you become psychologically free or remain trapped inside emotional exhaustion for the rest of your life. It is called psychic energy, and once you understand how it works, you will never waste your attention the same way again. Hashtag, the most valuable thing you own is invisible. There is something people can take from you without touching your wallet, without entering your home, without ever laying a hand on you. It happens every single day, and most people willingly give it away. Carl Jung called it psychic energy. Today we might call it attention, mental bandwidth, emotional capacity. The name doesn't matter. The reality does. Every thought costs energy. Every emotion consumes energy. Every unresolved conflict continues demanding energy long after the conversation has ended. This is why some people wake up exhausted before the day has even begun. Their body slept. Their mind never did. Perhaps you've experienced it. Someone says one careless sentence. You leave the conversation. Hours later, you're still replaying it. You imagine better responses. You recreate the argument. You defend yourself against someone who isn't even there anymore. Nothing is happening in the present. Yet your entire nervous system continues fighting an imaginary battle. Where is your energy? It isn't with you. It is trapped inside yesterday. Jung understood something extraordinary. The unconscious cannot distinguish very well between an actual threat and a psychological one. Your body reacts. Your breathing changes. Your heart accelerates. Stress hormones flood your system, not because danger is present, but because attention has become imprisoned. That is why protecting your energy is not a luxury. It is psychological survival. Every unnecessary argument, every attempt to convince someone determined to misunderstand you, every emotional explanation offered to the wrong person has a hidden cost. You pay with your life force. Most people never calculate that price. They only notice the symptoms: constant fatigue, anxiety, brain fog, lack of motivation, difficulty concentrating. They think something is wrong with them. Often, nothing is wrong. Their energy is simply scattered everywhere except within themselves. Imagine trying to fill a glass with water while dozens of tiny holes cover the bottom. No matter how much water you pour, the glass never stays full. That is exactly how most people live. Every notification steals attention. Every comparison drains confidence. Every criticism captures another piece of emotional energy. Every attempt to control how others perceive you opens another leak. Then people wonder why they no longer recognize themselves. Because they have invested more energy maintaining other people's opinions than building their own inner world. Jung believed that psychic energy naturally flows toward whatever dominates your attention. Read that again. Your energy follows your attention, not your intentions, not your dreams, not your goals. Your attention. If your attention lives inside other people's approval, your energy belongs to them. If your attention lives inside fear, fear becomes your master. If your attention lives inside resentment, the past quietly controls your future. The frightening part is that nobody forces this to happen. The unconscious simply follows habit, and habits become destiny. Think about how often your mood changes because of someone else's behavior. A delayed reply, a critical comment, a stranger's opinion online. One sentence can completely alter your emotional state. Why? Because your attention immediately abandons yourself and attaches to the external world. Psychological freedom begins the moment attention returns home. This is why silence becomes so powerful. Silence is not merely refusing to speak. Silence is refusing to donate your attention to everything demanding it. The modern world profits from your distraction. Social media fights for your attention. News competes for your attention. Conflict demands your attention. Comparison consumes your attention. Everyone wants access to the one resource that determines the quality of your life. Very few people ask, who deserves it? Jung often emphasized that becoming conscious requires withdrawing energy from unconscious patterns. In simple words, every time you stop reacting automatically, you recover a small part of yourself. Every unnecessary argument you refuse is energy returned. Every grudge you release, energy returned. Every explanation you no longer feel obligated to give, energy returned. Every toxic relationship you leave behind, energy returned. This is why people who have done deep inner work often appear different. Not louder, not more aggressive, simply present. Their attention is no longer fragmented. It has become concentrated. And concentrated attention creates something difficult to describe, but impossible to ignore. Presence. Real presence has nothing to do with charisma. It has everything to do with undivided energy. You have probably met someone like this. They enter a room without trying to impress anyone, without demanding attention, without speaking much at all. Yet somehow, everyone notices them. Why? Because they are completely where they are. Most people aren't. Most people exist in 3 different places at once. Thinking about yesterday, worrying about tomorrow, pretending to listen today. Presence is rare, and rarity always carries value. But there is still one invisible chain preventing most people from protecting their energy. It is older than fear, older than rejection, older than success itself. It is the desperate need to be approved. And until that chain breaks, no amount of silence will ever make you truly free, because you will still be speaking, only now inside your own mind. Hashtag the prison of approval. There is a question hiding beneath almost every human interaction. It is rarely spoken aloud, yet it quietly influences careers, relationships, dreams, and even identity itself. The question is simple. Asterisk, do they approve of me? Asterisk, most people never realize how much of their life is organized around answering that question. They choose safer opinions. They soften uncomfortable truths. They avoid conflict. They hide parts of themselves, not because they are dishonest, but because somewhere deep inside, the fear of rejection feels greater than the desire for authenticity. Carl Jung believed this fear is born long before adulthood. Every child learns that certain behaviors are rewarded, while others are punished. Acceptance becomes associated with obedience. Love becomes confused with performance. Without noticing, the child begins constructing a personality designed to survive. Years later, the body grows older, but the unconscious continues asking the same question. Asterisk, will they still love me if I disappoint them? Asterisk, this is where approval becomes an addiction. And like every addiction, it offers temporary relief, while quietly destroying freedom. Approval feels wonderful. Someone compliments you. You feel lighter. Someone praises your work. Confidence rises. Someone admires your intelligence. You feel significant. There is nothing wrong with appreciation. The danger begins when appreciation becomes a necessity, because the moment your identity depends on external validation, you surrender control over your emotional life. Now strangers possess the power to shape your confidence. Now criticism feels catastrophic. Now disagreement becomes personal. Now silence becomes impossible. You explain yourself constantly because you are not protecting truth. You are protecting approval. Jung warned that anything remaining unconscious eventually gains authority over us. Approval is one of those invisible authorities. It disguises itself as kindness, responsibility, empathy, generosity. Yet beneath those beautiful words, fear quietly hides. Fear of abandonment, fear of exclusion, fear of not being enough. This explains why saying no feels uncomfortable for so many people. It is rarely about the request itself. It is about what the unconscious believes the refusal might cost. Asterisk, what if they stop liking me? Asterisk, what if they become angry? Asterisk, what if they leave? Asterisk. Notice how quickly the mind begins negotiating against itself. Before anyone rejects you, you have already rejected your own needs. That is the tragedy. Many people are abandoned by themselves long before anyone else abandons them. The world simply reflects what has already happened inside. Imagine carrying a bucket with a small crack. Every compliment fills it. Every criticism empties it. Your entire emotional state depends upon who happens to speak that day. This is how approval keeps people psychologically exhausted. Because the bucket never becomes whole. It only waits for the next person to refill it. Jung believed individuation begins the moment you stop asking the world to confirm who you are, not because other people become unimportant, but because your center of gravity finally moves inward. Think about the strongest people you have ever met. Were they obsessed with convincing everyone? Probably not. Were they constantly explaining themselves? Rarely. Did they need universal agreement? Never. Their confidence came from somewhere deeper. It came from alignment. There is enormous peace in reaching the point where misunderstanding no longer feels like a personal emergency. Because the truth is, not everyone is supposed to understand you. Some people only understood the version of you that benefited them. The agreeable version, the available version, the endlessly patient version, the version that never created discomfort. The moment you outgrow that role, they call it change. But perhaps it is not change at all. Perhaps it is simply the first time they are meeting the real you. This is why psychological growth often feels lonely. Not because authenticity isolates you, but because authenticity quietly dissolves relationships built upon performance. The mask disappears, and suddenly, only genuine connections remain. Everything else begins falling away. At first, that feels like loss. Eventually, you recognize it as freedom. Freedom does not arrive the day everyone accepts you. Freedom arrives the day acceptance is no longer the price of being yourself. That is the beginning of inner authority. But there is still one force more powerful than approval. One force that unconsciously shapes nearly every decision you make. Most people spend their entire lives trying to escape it. Without realizing, the harder they run, the stronger it becomes. Carl Jung called it the shadow. And until you understand your shadow, You will never truly understand why silence frightens some people, or why it once frightened you. Hashtag the shadow is not what you think. If someone asked you to describe your darkest side, what would you say? Your anger? Your jealousy? Your fear? Most people believe the shadow is made only of everything ugly they try to hide. Carl Jung disagreed. The shadow is much larger than that. It contains every part of yourself that you rejected because you believed it would cost you love. Think about that. Perhaps your confidence became part of your shadow because someone once called you arrogant. Perhaps your ambition disappeared into the shadow because people accused you of being selfish. Perhaps your sensitivity was buried because someone told you to stop crying. Little by little, you learned which parts of yourself were acceptable. Everything else was pushed underground. The unconscious never destroys these parts. It simply hides them, and whatever is hidden eventually begins controlling you from behind scenes. That is why Jung insisted that the greatest danger is not becoming aware of your darkness. The greatest danger is believing you do not have one. The shadow always finds another way to express itself. Sometimes through explosive anger, sometimes through anxiety, sometimes through resentment, sometimes through endless people-pleasing. Yes, even excessive kindness can become a shadow behavior, because not every act of kindness comes from love. Some come from fear, fear of conflict, fear of rejection, fear of disappointing someone. Outwardly, it looks generous. Internally, it is survival. This is where silence becomes transformational. When you stop reacting automatically, the shadow begins speaking, not through words, through discomfort. You suddenly notice how difficult it is not to answer every message immediately. You notice how uncomfortable it feels when someone misunderstands you. You notice the urge to defend yourself, to explain, to convince, to fix. These impulses reveal something extraordinary. They reveal the parts of you still searching for permission to exist. Silence exposes them. That is why inner work feels uncomfortable. You're no longer distracted by noise. You are finally listening. Most people mistake this discomfort for failure. It is exactly the opposite. Discomfort is evidence that unconscious material has reached consciousness. Imagine cleaning an old room that has remained locked for decades. The first thing you notice is not beauty. It is dust, darkness, clutter. The room always looked like that. You simply never open the door. The shadow works the same way. It has always been there. Silence simply gives you enough space to notice it. This is why people avoid being alone. Not because solitude is painful, because solitude removes distractions. Without constant stimulation, without endless conversations, without notifications, without entertainment, you begin hearing yourself. And that voice often asks questions that are impossible to ignore. Who am I trying to impress? Why do I need everyone to understand me? Why am I afraid of disappointing people? Who would I become if I stopped performing? These questions have no quick answers. Jung believed they should not. Because individuation is not a destination. It is a lifelong dialogue between your conscious identity and everything you have hidden from yourself. The irony is almost tragic. The qualities you admire most in powerful people, courage, authenticity, calmness, boundaries, confidence, were once uncomfortable for them too. They were not born free. They became free by repeatedly choosing truth over approval. This is why silence frightens people who have never met their own shadow. Your calm becomes a reminder of the battle they continue avoiding. Your boundaries expose their lack of boundaries. Your peace highlights their inner chaos. Your refusal to react removes the emotional fuel they unconsciously depended upon. You never needed to defeat them. You only needed to stop participating. And once you understand this, relationships begin looking completely different. You stop asking, how do I make people respect me? Instead, you begin asking a far more important question. What kind of person am I becoming every time I betray myself just to keep someone comfortable? That single question changes everything. Because respect is never something you chase. It is something that naturally follows integrity. And integrity begins with one simple decision: to stop abandoning yourself. But what happens after that decision? What happens after the silence? After the discomfort? After meeting your shadow? Something remarkable begins to emerge. Not confidence, something much deeper. A presence so quiet that it no longer needs to prove anything. And according to Carl Jung, that is where true psychological authority is born. Hashtag, the quiet authority no one can fake. There's a kind of authority that cannot be purchased. It cannot be learned from a motivational speech. It cannot be copied from successful people. And it certainly cannot be performed. You either become it, or people immediately sense that you are pretending. Most people confuse authority with dominance. They believe authority belongs to the loudest voice, the strongest opinion, the person who always has the perfect answer. Carl Jung saw something entirely different. Real authority is not built by controlling others. It is born from mastering yourself. Think about the people who naturally command respect. They rarely interrupt. They rarely defend themselves. They rarely rush to prove they are right. Why? Because certainty has no urgency. Only insecurity feels the need to convince everyone. The insecure mind is always negotiating, always explaining, always searching for signs of approval. The center mind does something else. It observes. It listens. It responds only when necessary. This is not passivity. It is discipline. Modern culture rewards immediate reaction. Someone criticizes you. React. Someone insults you. React. Someone misunderstands you. React. Everything encourages emotional impulsiveness. But Jung believed consciousness grows in the small space between stimulus and response. That invisible pause is where freedom lives. Most people never enter that space. Their emotions decide first. Their awareness arrives later. Imagine standing beside a river after heavy rain. The current is violent. Branches rush past. The water is loud. That river is the unconscious mind when left unattended. Every emotion becomes an emergency. Every thought becomes reality. Every impulse demands action. Now, imagine the same river weeks later. The storm has ended. The surface becomes calm. For the first time, you can see beneath the water. Nothing changed below. Only the surface became still enough to reveal it. Your mind works exactly the same way. Silence calms the surface. Awareness reveals what was always there. This is why emotionally mature people often appear slower. Not because they think slowly, because they refuse to let emotions think for them. Every unnecessary reaction is postponed, examined, questioned, sometimes released completely. That simple habit changes everything. Carl Jung spent decades studying the difference between unconscious living and conscious living. He noticed that unconscious people believe every thought. Conscious people observe their thoughts before believing them. One sentence changes an entire life. Instead of asking, asterisk, why did this happen to me? Asterisk, they ask, asterisk, what is this trying to teach me? Asterisk, instead of saying, asterisk, they made me angry. Asterisk, they quietly wonder. Asterisk, why did that trigger such a strong reaction inside me? Asterisk, responsibility quietly replaces blame. Curiosity replaces defensiveness. Growth replaces repetition. This is psychological authority, not controlling circumstances, controlling your relationship with them. There is an invisible confidence that appears when you no longer need the world to constantly reassure you. You stop measuring yourself through applause. You stop shrinking to make insecure people comfortable. You stop chasing conversations that have already ended. You stop trying to rescue people determined to remain victims. And something remarkable begins happening. People notice, not because you became louder, because you became lighter. You carry less emotional noise, less resentment, less urgency, less need to prove yourself. Presence expands wherever inner conflict disappears. That is why some people seem magnetic without making any effort. Their attention is no longer divided. Their identity is no longer negotiated. Their peace is no longer dependent on external circumstances. They have become internally aligned. Jung believed alignment is one of the greatest expressions of individuation. When your actions, your values, your words, and your inner world finally begin pointing in the same direction, That integrity cannot be imitated. People feel it before they understand it. Children feel it. Animals feel it. Even strangers sense it. Not consciously, instinctively. Because authenticity communicates something language never can. Safety, strength, wholeness. Ironically, the more whole you become, the less interested you become in appearing impressive. Performance slowly disappears. Reality quietly takes its place. And that is when the deepest transformation begins. Not outside, inside. Because the greatest victory was never convincing the world who you are. The greatest victory was finally no longer needing to. Hashtag chapter 7. Hashtag the loneliness that creates a new life. Every transformation begins with a loss. Not the loss of money, not the loss of status, but the loss of an identity that no longer belongs to you. This is the part nobody talks about. People love the idea of becoming stronger. They love the promise of inner peace. They admire confidence, but very few are willing to endure the loneliness that always comes before it. Carl Jung understood this better than almost anyone. He knew that becoming your authentic self was never a social event. It was a solitary journey. There comes a moment when the old version of you begins disappearing. The people who once understood you no longer do. The conversations that once excited you feel empty. The places that once felt like home no longer recognize you. At first, this feels like failure. You wonder if something is wrong. You wonder if you become too distant, too quiet, too different. But perhaps nothing is wrong. Perhaps your soul has simply outgrown the life your personality was trying so desperately to preserve. Growth is rarely comfortable because every new version of yourself demands that an old version dies. Most people avoid transformation because they mistake discomfort for danger. Your nervous system interprets change as risk. The unconscious whispers, asterisk go back, asterisk be who they expect, asterisk don't disappoint anyone, asterisk stay where you are safe, asterisk. But there is one problem. The place that once protected you eventually becomes the place that imprisons you. You cannot become who you were meant to be while living entirely to satisfy people who only love the version of you that never changed. This is why your silence becomes a dividing line. Some people will walk away, not because you hurt them, because they no longer recognize the role you used to play. The therapist, the rescuer, the peacemaker, the people pleaser, the one who always said yes, the one who carried everyone's emotional weight. When those roles disappear, some relationships disappear with them. And painful as it may be, that is not always a tragedy. Sometimes, it is the first evidence that your life is becoming authentic. Jung believed that individuation requires separation from the collective, not permanent isolation, but temporary distance from everything that prevents you from hearing your own inner voice. Most people fear being alone, yet they spend their entire lives abandoning themselves just to avoid it. Which loneliness is greater? Being physically alone, or spending decades disconnected from your own soul? That question changes everything, because eventually you discover something unexpected. Solitude is not empty. It is full of thoughts you never allowed yourself to think, dreams you postponed, truths you buried, strength you never knew existed. The silence that once frightened you begins feeling like home. You stop reaching for your phone every few minutes. You stop needing constant validation. You stop explaining every decision. Your nervous system begins relaxing. For the first time in years, nothing demands your performance. You simply exist. And strangely, that becomes enough. There's a quiet confidence born inside people who survive this season. Not confidence built upon success, or appearance, or admiration, but confidence built upon evidence. The evidence that they can stand alone, without abandoning themselves. That confidence cannot be taken away, because it was never given by the world. It was discovered within. This is the moment Jung described as moving toward the self. The self is not your personality, is not your reputation, is not the image other people carry of you. It is the deepest center of your being, the place untouched by applause, untouched by criticism, untouched by comparison. The closer you move toward that center, the less power the outside world has over your inner peace. This is why truly mature people appear calm during chaos. They're no longer living from the outside in. They're living from the inside out. Their identity no longer depends upon circumstances. It depends upon alignment. And alignment creates something almost impossible to imitate. A presence that requires no performance. A silence that requires no explanation. A peace that requires no permission. That is why people notice them. Not because they demand attention, but because they no longer need it. And paradoxically, that is exactly what makes them unforgettable. ####, when silence becomes freedom. Imagine looking back at your life years from now, not remembering every argument you won, not remembering every person you convinced, not remembering every explanation you gave. Instead, imagine remembering the day you finally stopped betraying yourself, the day you stopped apologizing for needing peace, the day you stopped carrying responsibilities that never belonged to you, the day you realized your worth could not be measured by how available you were to everyone else. That day changes everything, because from that moment forward, you no longer live to be accepted. You live to be authentic. Carl Jung believed that the privilege of a lifetime is becoming who you truly are. Notice what he did not say. He did not say, the privilege of a lifetime is being understood, or admired, or approved. He said, becoming. Because authenticity is not a destination. It is a practice, a daily decision. Some days you will fail. Some days old patterns will return. You will explain yourself when silence would have been stronger. You will seek approval when truth would have been enough. You will react when peace was available. That does not mean you have failed. It means you are human. Transformation is never linear, but every moment of awareness changes the direction of your life. Little by little, you stop living unconsciously. Little by little, you stop fearing other people's opinions. Little by little, your energy returns. Your confidence returns. Your joy returns. Not because the world changed, because you did. And perhaps that is the greatest secret hidden inside silence. Silence never changes other people first. It changes you. It teaches patience, discernment, presence, emotional freedom. And once those qualities become part of who you are, the world cannot help but respond differently. Not because you demanded respect, because you became someone who naturally inspires it. So the next time you feel the urge to explain yourself, pause, take one slow breath. Ask yourself one simple question. Am I speaking to express my truth? Or am I speaking because I am afraid of being misunderstood? That single question may change your entire life. Because the day you stop fearing misunderstanding is the day you finally begin understanding yourself. And according to Carl Jung, there is no greater freedom than that. If this message resonated with you, write in the comments, I choose inner peace over external approval. Those 7 words are more than a comment. They are a commitment. And if you're ready to continue this journey into Jung's deepest ideas, stay with us for the next video. Because this was never just about silence. It was about becoming the person your soul has been waiting for all along. See you in the next journey.